It's the potential for social responsible investing.
Perfect.
I was impressed with what they
Yeah,
do.
I don't think. Good.
Brandon, you heard from Jane?
She'll be here, I'm sure.
Okay. You usually get early.
I met with her today and she didn't mention anything about not being there, being here today.
When?
Just in case I need to share my screen with her.
Yeah, we've got lots of months of weather left through May usually.
Yeah. Pick some for something, yeah.
Oh, no, nice.
That old tradition.
Nice.
Yeah. That'd be a while.
Then you started your new position. But.
They're still sledding in school a lot. There she is.
You know. It's okay. Some things are planned.
I get it. Well, you know, honestly, it's just a big train.
Wow.
You get one or two. Oh, we don't know. I just got that.
It looks like that, it's regular too.
One adjustment to the agenda is adding Meg's presentation about the regional resilience.
Oh, it would be very, yeah.
She emailed us about it and it never made it onto the agenda.
Oh, I don't remember. So where do you think we should do that?
I would put it at the top.
Such a good concept. I'm sure.
Sarah, she'll be down, right?
Yep, she was printing off a couple things for the meeting and we'll be there.
Okay.
Not always.
I've been told.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to wait for it.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. 6 o'clock, we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as you can tell from the group gathered here, we have a number of important things on the agenda. One item that we unintentionally omitted was a presentation from Meg Rasmussen on an MCOG resilience program. So that'll be at the beginning of the action items. Do we have any declarations of conflicts of interest?
I do related to the leases.
Right. Tammy's on the board of the Historical Society, so she recuses herself from votes regarding those proposed leases. We have the minutes of the last meeting. Have people had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Any other changes for Judy? No. No. Do I hear a motion to approve those?
So,
Second.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Were there any communications from the public to any select board members? I don't think so. Did you have any, Brandon?
Nope.
All right, then. Is that Irene coming down the stairs? Did people receive the warrant that was circulated this afternoon? Did we have any questions? No questions on the warrant? Okay, then we'll sign that for you.
What perfect timing, Irene.
Are there any public comments other than the items that are on the agenda for tonight? No, all right, I'm gonna let you. Oh, okay. All right. Meg, you wanna go ahead and tell us about the your matter? Thanks.
Hanging on the agenda.
Sure.
So, I'm Meg Rasmussen. I'm the Director of Sustainability Programs at the Midwest Council of Government. And that's the regional planning entity that covers this area. So we work on housing, transportation, workforce development, economic development, and sustainability issues. So basically helping to support healthy communities as times change. So today I'm asking for a letter of support for a project that MCOG is applying to FEMA. And the project builds on what St. George has been doing to make the working waterfronts more resilient to coastal flooding and severe storms. Waterfront access for commercial fishermen, for seaweed harvesters, folks in aquaculture, clammers and wormers is being lost. Frequently, when a property changes hands, the new owners may not be so willing to allow people to access the waterfront from their property. So people needing waterfront access are important to their communities, both economically and culturally. In addition, recreational waterfront users are boaters are bringing significant dollars to local economies. So as private access is diminishing, municipal access points become more and more important in sustaining local economies and communities. So, but those municipal access points may be at risk for a lot of the severe storms we've been having, storm surge, and also for coastal flooding. And many towns are in the same boat about this, facing these kinds of risks. So our idea is to bring 5 towns together. And that's the 5 towns are Warren, Thomaston, South Thomaston, St. George, and Cushing, to collaboratively plan to address these issues. Everybody's not gonna have the same issues, but there's enough overlap that I think sharing resources, sharing planning is gonna be beneficial. So the project is designed to help towns understand the risks to their municipal waterfronts and what could be economically and culturally lost if this infrastructure was impaired. So the 5 key components of the project are, of course, community engagement. And I know there's a lot going on already. So our idea is to, we'll kind of slipstream into what, the other planning activities that are happening. We're proposing to do waterfront and intertidal access inventories and identify the risks to those points of waterfront access. We would like to do a little economic impact analysis to quantify the financial contributions of the working waterfront and the intertidal access points, because that will help support some data-driven decision-making in the future. And then we'd like to facilitate creating a regional resilience plan, so kind of a coordinated strategy. So that would be for funding improvements, policy recommendations, things like that. So the benefits are to help towns protect your critical infrastructure. It informs funding applications in the future by providing this sort of data-backed justification, so, grantors like to see that. And it all will also help to strengthen regional collaboration to address these challenges kind of more effectively than each town trying to address them all on their own. So what would be the role of the select board or St. George? It was, if we could get your support to ensure the effort moves forward and kind of in align with your municipal priorities. Of course, we welcome and would be seeking insights and collaboration about local concerns, potential challenges and opportunities. And that can be with, committees or the public at large. And it won't cost you anything.
Always popular.
Oh, yeah, funding. The project would start probably in March of 2026, and I think we would need 2 years to complete it.
How does this dovetail with the other planning work that the Resilience Committee has contemplated?
Best friends.
So it will be well integrated?
I would think so. I don't see how it would not be.
Well, she's also part of the committee.
Right.
Meg's part of the committee.
I know that. I just, so this is specific to access. Is that right?
Yes.
Which the
Collecting,
resilience committee isn't really focusing on.
right.
So this is just making our project for the town, giving it a wider scope.
So you're collecting more data to inform planning that we have contemplated.
That's good.
And it's an application going to FEMA, is that right?
Yeah, it's through the Maine Emergency Management Agency through MEMA. So, I know federal funding is up in the air, so we've been told just stay the course and they'll figure it out, but they have each state gets $2 million. And so this application is to Maine's portion of that.
What do you need from us?
I would love a letter of support. I can provide some language, but a letter of support would be very helpful.
Do other people have questions? Well, I'll make a motion that we provide such a letter. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? All right, Meg, why don't you send that to me and we'll do that. Thank you.
Sure.
So the next item on the budget is the budget review.
So.
Go, Brandon, go.
So we did departments 1 through 6 at our last meeting. And we'll be picking up in Department 7, solid waste.
We did.
We did do solid waste? Great, I thought so as well.
We did get straight away.
Then Department 8 is general assistance. It is remaining at 2,500. Any questions?
How many years has it been now? It's 2,500.
At least 10.
Quite some time, quite some time.
But, if we don't get any applicants.
Yeah.
Department 9, social and community services, the recommendation that is in here, from the budget committee is 35,000. Since then, we've got a couple additional requests. And so what I would like to present to the select board, knowing that it has not gone through, the budget committee, but to reflect those requests is a figure of 42,297 for Department 9, 9202, our social services.
A breakdown.
We do have a breakdown. I can, I can read through some of the organizations.
Here, Susie, why don't you come get it?
This is for you too, just.
Go ahead, so the rest of them hear it.
42,297.
41, 42.
Well, I had 42 written down.
41 here.
I'm gonna. I don't think he did anything, Irene. I think I wrote it down wrong. So 41,297.
Unless you heard from Maine Coast Heritage Trust, I thought they were gonna ask for some help. Maybe I haven't heard from them till the last minute.
I had talked to Ken at the end of last week or so about that, and I was, think was just gonna get, an email. At this point, I have not seen anything.
Oh, okay. I just asked because that would have brought it up 1,000 if we gave them 1,000.
Well, and so it may be worth adding the additional 1,000, bringing it up to 42,297 in case there are a couple requests that we have fulfilled in the past that have not yet come in.
Yeah, Greg had his hand up, but it went down.
Greg, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just curious if since I'm not there, sorry, if you read through just the ones that are new, in addition to the 37,140 or the original number we had there, the 35.
The Knox Clinic, I don't believe that their request had come in yet. That was for $2,000. And then the CDC submitted, I think we had a placeholder in for them, and they submitted an updated request of $15,000.
Thank you.
And can you just, can I ask?
Mhm.
Can you just, where were we last year for, Rockland District Nursing and Trekkers? Are these similar numbers to last year?
Yeah,
Okay,
all of these are similar. The CDC's was an increase, and the rest were all
Yeah.
right around last year's numbers.
great, thank you. And nothing for Maine Coast Heritage Trust?
I've not seen anything. Ken, I don't know if you have any insight.
We had made contributions to them in years past without a letter of
For a
request.
number of years, yeah.
Because of the public lands that they caretake on Clark Island and others.
High Island, Clark Island, and the
He
Benford
muted.
Preserve. Yeah, and it's really it's a small amount for them, but shows our commitment to,
It probably leverages other funds.
yeah.
Ken, do you have any insight about that?
No, I'd spoken to the people there and they were gonna send something in. There was a little bit confusion because the person that normally submits it changed positions. So I spoke to the new person about doing that. And I thought they were gonna send an email in. I can check with them again.
The deadline for these requests.
Well, it really should be like January 15th,
Okay,
so
so
they're
we're really at the end.
dragging their feet.
But I mean, if,
But they've never had to
I say if
request
perennially,
anything.
yeah,
In the past, they didn't request, so.
I was building this line off of requests that we had received.
So are you suggesting then that we go with the 42,297, thinking that if that's been our pattern to give them money without a request, that we should at least keep that in here?
That would be my recommendation.
All right, you want to go on to the next lines?
There are no other major changes in the rest of that department.
Hog it.
Oh, fine, I can see it.
Are there any questions about Department 9?
What was the increase for the CDC? How much did it go up?
I think it was 11,000 last year and it's 15 now. Is that,
I say Rob is on here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Rob?
believe it was 12 last year, and the specific rationale is basically food prices and the demand for the community cupboard. We're serving 50 families a week now, which is significantly higher even than during the height of COVID. And we all know what's happened with food prices. And so basically we have to absorb those somehow. So we put in a modest increase and are making up the vast majority of the rest through increased donations.
thank you.
Any other questions on Department 9? Great. Department 10, Parks and Recreation. You'll see an increase to the property maintenance line that did not exist last year. recommended $10,000 this year, knowing that there will be a vote at town meeting as to whether or not the town would like to accept the donation of the youth and scouting property, and that the programs there would fall under this department, wanting to have at least something aside to put into the building to make it available to operate programs. And then otherwise, the requests look pretty similar to years past. There are ball field maintenance has gone up in the last couple of years just based on what materials cost. But otherwise, nothing too different there. Comments, questions?
Looks good to me.
If the vote were to go ahead on the acquisition of that Nose Point property and the other, the question is then, are we going to make some modifications upstairs to expand office space? And have we thought about that financially?
Yes, we have. There's property maintenance for this building in Department 1 that was dedicated to some of those improvements.
Okay, I just, wanted to say, was there enough there that you thought that
Yeah.
could be renovated properly?
There's likely some that won't be used this year, knowing that the vote is just before the town meeting vote is, close to the end of the fiscal year, and so I'd likely ask to carry forward some of those funds to.
Okay, I just thought that.
But yeah, no, that's
be
a-
balanced out.
That's a good catch and consideration. Let's see, Department 11, the major change here is around the municipal boat reserve. You'll see that the department as a whole is not increasing much. That line is because it has been prioritized to get the harbor master into a safer boat. And so that money is coming from a loan that was paid off. And so that's why you can see a large jump to that line without it being reflected in the department's total.
So it's not driving the budget up at all, or it's not much.
Not really, no. Most of the increase is around salary and benefits and all of that.
What's the status of new boat?
Well, with this budget, he should be able to order the boat and.
I mean, we already have one in mind and what,
Mhm.
yeah, great.
Yep,
A boat that floats, good idea.
yes. Any questions on Department 11? Department 12, no major changes, but if folks have any questions, happy to get into them.
You just explain the energy efficiency reserve.
Yep, that is money set aside for energy efficiency, whether it be new windows or heat systems or, whatever it may be.
And are we still thinking about maybe heat pumps for this building?
Yes. Sorry, can I,
Yeah.
there's two lines in that section unclassified. One is a contingency line, and that could be used for a number of things, but one of its main purposes might be to, as grant matching money. Remember- Pardon me? Oh, remember that we had a grant earlier this year for the road design. We had to provide a 5% match. There'll be other grants that we'll need to write, and we may or may not need matching funds. So this sets aside some money so that we can proceed with bringing in more money from outside town than inside town. And then the energy efficient reserve is what we've been using over the last 6 years to pay for the solar panels. Those are now purchased, but we're gonna have, there's so much more to do. So I mean, we're a little town and there's gonna be a lot of dollars. I just wanna keep piling money up. So I don't have a particular project in mind right now, but I have a whole committee of smart people and they're gonna be working on what comes next.
It's good.
And
Thank
you're
you.
speaking with your resilience hat on when you
Yes,
say
this is-
that. Yeah,
Full.
right, well, right,
A woman of many hats.
that's right.
I will say there was conversation around and should be made. Just contingency leaves it rather open-ended, whereas if it was more specifically stated for grant matching funds, but it ended up going in there as contingency.
Ken, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I guess I had one question relative, I think it was in this account last year where we added the money for the traffic calming effort. Is there any money anywhere in the budget for next year for continuing with the committee's recommendations?
There is not, but I don't know that. I don't see a strong need next year for purchases. Some of the the signage and whatnot that we are purchasing allows us to collect more data. And the hope is that next year we would do precisely that, is collect a more holistic data set for the town and figure out where folks actually are speeding, and then what calming measures can be put in place.
And we still don't have all of the equipment that we anticipate coming, right?
Correct.
So there's still gonna be some of those electronic feedback signs coming in the next few months.
They're ordered, right? You ordered?
And people
Thank you.
people should be aware on the traffic calming issue that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, the Emergency Services Committee meets. And I think it's upstairs because the planning board isn't here. And the sheriff will be here. So if anybody wants to attend and share any concerns or listen to him talk about law enforcement issues in town, you should think about that.
Any other questions on Department 12?
I guess on the school payment, that's what we anticipate their
It's
budget
just a
to be.
reasonable guess.
It's a guess because they haven't.
I think, didn't you say that you put that up 3 or 5%?
I believe it was 3. Irene, do you remember?
I don't.
I believe it was 3, and I, in conversations with Mike, that's where he's at right now anyway, and what they're working on
So
building, so.
it's a reasonable guess. They'll pass their budget in June. But
Right.
no.
So there's nothing in Department 16, and then Department 18 is EMS. There was a lot of conversation about finding ways to ensure that this department's budget remains sustainable, as it is our largest department in town. And we were in the midst of a hiring process when the budget was being built, and so my recommendation to the budget committee was that we move forward with the requests that were put together with the last chief and myself, and that would give our next chief the opportunity to assess the department a bit more thoroughly and work to figure out what some of those long-term savings could be. Katie Jacob is our new chief. She's here tonight. So Katie, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the pieces that you are considering when looking at this budget for next year.
Yeah, spent a lot of time looking at, some of the bigger lines, mostly staffing, and optimizing staffing to maintain high close staff, patient level, but match the workload that we have right now. Things like purchasing, equipment, ordering in bulk and sharing that with other departments, so we work really closely with, and then preventative vehicle maintenance, that's a big line for us that has been a challenge, and doing some more preventative stuff other than cost increases, so.
And Katie and I have met and reviewed our scheduling and our, the coverage for who's on and when and how many folks. And we are both optimistic that this department can come under budget next year. And so the hope is that that will realize to be true. And then any savings there, we could ask the voters to put forth towards a new ambulance, again, helping expedite that process and save on some of the vehicle repairs that we're currently spending on. And then for next year's budget, have a bit more accurate of an estimate for what this department will cost year over year.
Great. Welcome, Katie.
Yes.
Any other questions about EMS?
How many full-time people do we have? Yeah.
We have 4. We have a chief and then 3 paramedics.
And at the moment, you have 3 people on duty at any given time?
Ideally, that's not always accurate, sometimes more, sometimes less. But the ideal structure is 1 paramedic that's always on, and then 2 EMTs on with them. Whether or not that will continue and we will need all 3 on all the time, Katie and I will work to figure out.
And one of those 3 serves as a driver, or is that separate?
Correct.
Yeah. So you have a big drop in equipment purchases in here, right? Oh, you just moved it to the new vehicle line. I see it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It was lumped in with some of the other equipment purchases, just general equipment that they would need. And I just felt like it was cleaner to separate it out and show how much money we were actually putting away for an ambulance.
Yeah.
And again, as you'll remember, there's a decrease in the property maintenance line. It's non-existent here now. Because that has all been moved to Department 1, getting the cost of maintaining this facility under one line to, again, just paint a clearer, more transparent picture of what it costs to maintain our town office. This is our last department. Any questions?
Just roughly, what is the cost of a new ambulance? You could probably answer that.
450 is.
So we're banking towards it.
And we have money in there already, so, right?
Not much,
No,
not much. I think, yeah. When we absorbed that department, there was essentially zip, so we.
And we didn't put much in.
Last year, we
Right.
put in a minimal amount as we just sort of got used to everything. I think we have 1 more year of getting used to everything and just making sure they have the funds that they need to make sure the town is covered well. And then we'll have way more realistic or accurate numbers next year.
Yeah.
Suzie, is this ambulance reserve? It's 127,000, does that apply to the new ambulance?
Yeah, the new vehicle line is exactly for the new ambulance.
yeah.
So
So
we'll need
one,
probably 3.
127 in the reserve.
yeah, so one thing people need to keep in mind, as people ask us about the budget is the point that Susie's making that, and Brandon's made, that we're sort of in the catch-up years for putting money away for these big ticket purchases for fire trucks and ambulances.
During the pandemic, we really worked to keep our property taxes flat, but it meant that things didn't get addressed that now we're having to play catch up a little bit.
But hopefully in a couple of years, we'll get to where we don't have these 100,000 plus.
We'll be able to save, once we get a new ambulance, you know, so we have 127 in there, we're putting another 125. It'll take 2 more years then we'll have a new ambulance, then we have 10 years to save instead of 3 or 4.
Yeah,
Right,
But you're assuming that the ambulance doesn't double in price.
Well, we're hoping.
right.
But I think this reserve kind of budgeting is the best way to go.
Well, it's just like family budgeting. You gotta be looking ahead. You can't just go out and buy a $450,000 ambulance with your pocket
Yeah,
change.
well, people do, but they're way in the hole.
Right.
So are we, any other questions related to the budget review? Thank you
It's chatting.
Now, Van had a question about the payment on the 10 Cold Storage Road. And the bond we still have over 12 years to pay on that. It's the initial purchase of the property that we were paying $78,000 a year.
That's the West, but
And that's the one that's paid off.
And that's
That
been
was-
paid
that
off.
was over 10 years.
That was the 10-year.
And so that one was
Talk
paid
about
off
the
last
savings
year.
now.
So it's
That's
just
why
a
the Pope
vote.
didn't drive that department up into the sky.
If we can pay some off early on the bond.
Yeah, I will. And then with the cold storage, the Port Clyde Landing project at 10 Cold Storage Road, we are, closing in on the end of the project and working hard to minimize costs. We are optimistic that we will be able to pay at least one, in an ideal world, maybe even 2 years of the bond off early, which over time saves around $100,000 of tax dollars in interest payments that we would make in that time. And so we are keeping that threshold in mind so that we can get ourselves out from some of that interest if possible.
Well, thank you very much to the budget committee and Brandon and Irene for bringing us through all of this.
Brendan did a great job.
Yes, he did.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we said this in the budget committee, but I think we should just acknowledge in the full select board meeting that this is your first time through this, and we were all very impressed by the questions you brought, the approach you brought, your preparedness. It was great. And good for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think we'll keep him.
We also heard from department heads how happy they were at the extent to which Brandon involved them in their planning for their department. So
That's why Katie is the only one that attended this process, is she was not yet here. And so everyone else was very involved in the process. And so they were able to sit out of this part of it.
yeah, that's important. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
So if the budget committee folks want to leave, you can feel free to do that. I think I would like to take the shellfish ordinance ahead of these other items so that Jeff doesn't have to stay. If he doesn't want to stay, you're welcome to stay. As I unfortunately had not reviewed this in detail till the last few days. And then I did I guess I should provide some background on this, or Tammy could provide the background on this. We're a member along with the same 4 other towns, right, that Meg was listing in a shellfish management program. And Tammy's our representative to that board, and that group has brought to us a proposed modification of the shellfish management ordinance. And most of it is uncontroversial as far as I could tell. But the one concern I had was the disorderly conduct definition and then penalty section. So if you can explain to us, Jeff, what prompted these proposed changes and your thoughts.
Yeah, so the disorderly conduct one, so when I took this job, a few years ago now. I went through and read the ordinance, and tried to understand it as best I could. And the last page of the ordinance, it talks about misconduct. This is the old ordinance before I revised it. And it gives a very general definition of misconduct. It just says anyone who is rude or threatening to the town administrator shall have their license suspended for, 1 month or 1 year. And I thought that wasn't, specific enough. And so I contacted, the Walterboro shellfish warden, who's also a police officer. I said, what do you guys use for your, your misconduct, definition? And he sent me what they use in their ordinance. And it basically mirrors the state statute. And that's what the proposed change is, picks up elements, basically, verbatim from the state statute on disorderly. And so it gives a little bit more detail on what actually constitutes disorderly conduct. And this has come up a few times since I've been in this job, where there are licensed clam diggers that are rude or threatening the town officials. It's come up like probably 3 times. And I think this new definition, using the state definition, will give a little bit more, if I have to write a summons or this goes to court, it'll give a little bit more specificity to the violation. And so that was the thought process behind that.
Jeff, I think one of the clarifying points that folks wanted to make sure we understood is that this couldn't be used. So meaning if someone is disorderly, but not in anything related to shellfish, that their license wouldn't be subject to suspension because they yelled at somebody at the grocery store, for example.
Right. Yeah, that's why it says town official in there,
Mhm.
which could be myself or anybody at any of the 5 towns. Yeah, right. And that comes up too with, because we have littering in the ordinance too. So if they're littering while conducting clamming, that's one thing. Or what if I see them at Hannaford littering, it's the same kind of thought process, but
Mhm.
no, this is, they're in the town office being rude, or they're rude to me, or they're rude at a meeting like this. Is where that comes from, right?
Great.
Do other people have any questions related to this ordinance? And this is the same exact language being proposed to all 5 of the towns in our shellfish ordinance management group. I know some of the towns have already passed the ordinance, right?
Is this the first time we've had the same ordinance for all the 5 of them?
No, this has been around. I mean, you look at the ordinance, it goes back to, 2002. It looks like 96 it was adopted, so that's
So
when all 5
basically,
towns came together.
We're adopting a revised ordinance.
Right,
Right.
it's just revisions that we've made, it hasn't been revised in a number of years, so, there's a lot of revisions from things that I've seen since I've been in the job that, I feel should be updated, and then with the joint board's input, so.
So the question before the select board is whether we're comfortable submitting this proposed ordinance to St. George voters for their consideration in May. I'll move that we adopt the proposed amended regional shellfish management ordinance.
I'd second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor? That's all 5 of us. Okay, thanks.
That answers.
It does. You answered our questions. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I was especially happy to hear you tell us that this mirrored the state
right.
disorderly conduct stuff, and it does appear clear that your enforcement is limited to your jurisdiction in this context, so that's helpful. Thank you.
And if you're at town meeting, you could answer questions.
Yeah, and I'll come to the one in March and answer any of the.
He's gonna come when we have our public hearing on this ordinance in case people have any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we may as well get the food sovereignty issue I think that's quick too, if you're willing to do the, food sovereignty ordinance that's before us. I did have one question from Nina Cunningham, who raised this at our special town meeting in August, and is the reason we were prompted to think about this. And Nina was wanting to make sure that the definition of produced or prepared food would include things like her scones that she bakes and sells. And it did, I looked at, this mirrors the MMA proposed ordinance, and some other towns in Maine have local food sovereignty ordinances. So I don't know if anybody had any questions about this.
This too would go to the voters.
Yes, that's the same issue before us, is whether we would put this to the voters so that people having, you know, a curbside food stand or something are exempt from, all of the, regulations regarding, you know, food preparation and sale. It, you know, it takes these, the people in the definitions, you know, like the person that sells eggs,
Yeah,
and whatnot, those people are exempted from these other state laws regarding food.
I keep picturing kids with a lemonade stand.
Right.
Yeah.
People like that are gonna be exempt.
I move we accept the ordinance and move it forward for the public to vote.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor? That's all 5 of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for working tonight.
All right. Do you want to talk about the leases?
Sure. As you all saw, I received Bill Kelly's recommendations for leases regarding 38 Main Street and Marshall Point Lighthouse on Friday afternoon. Sent them out to you all. Knowing that it was a very quick turnaround from when we got them to this meeting, I reached out to the Historical Society, including the Lighthouse Association, to see if they wanted to review this together to try to make sure that there was clarity and we were understanding things that were written the same way, because it's, you know, a lot of legal policy added into it. And so we met today at 1 o'clock. Jan and I met with Nat and Scott and Dale. And so there are some things that we think need cleaning up, because there just wasn't enough time from Friday to now to touch on some of those pieces. And so I think we can get into each of those, and I'm happy to let you all speak on your own behalf. And so I don't know if we want to start with the Historical Society, meaning 38 Main Street, and then we'll cover the lighthouse after.
Well, as we discussed this afternoon, and as we read in the proposed lease, the word apartment appears 5 times, and that will need to be deleted. It appears 3 times on page 1, once on page 3, and once on page 5.
And that came from a miscommunication on my end. I had been told in the past that somebody had lived upstairs, not as part of, from when, before the Historical Society was in there. That may or may not be true, but either way, it doesn't belong in their uses, and so we can easily take that out of there.
Then Brandon and Jane asked us to go through, we see there any changes we wished to make, or things we found to be problematic, and Dale has gone through it too. So Dale, did you have anything else?
I highlighted the same thing that Nat did relative to getting permission to, or submitting an application, or just short of that, for any improvements that we're doing, you know, whether it's painting, and most of our stuff has been volunteer. And so I'm not too concerned with it, but whatever day, sometime in the future, we'll be needing that. And to what extent we need to get you to approve somebody that we're working with. It just didn't seem kind of gaudy and unnecessary if, from my standpoint of a relationship, that we've been successful to this point. And it just seemed like another layer or something that would either not happen or could be a problem when it hasn't been anything.
Again, I don't think it's as formal as a process as you may be fearing, you know.
Just go by what I read.
Right, right, understandably, but I think it doesn't need to be anything more than, you know, hey, we're replacing the gutters on the building. So-and-so is doing the work for us. I say that's great. You know, there's no application process that needs to then come before the board for review. It's really just trying to make sure that there is a dialogue between both parties.
And just for context, people should be aware that, you know, that Bill Kelly provided us with a lease that is fairly standard between his municipal clients and tenants. And so it includes this language of the tenant clearing contractors and work done with the municipality. And because of the relationships with the Historical Society and the Lighthouse and our town office, it hasn't been formal in the way that it appears in this lease. And so it was a little intimidating to people to feel like they were gonna be required, if you're fixing the kitchen sink, you know, to get Brandon's okay for Joe the plumber to come do that. So I think hopefully Brandon's reassured people that,
The reassurance is great, but how does that affect the record on next week or next year? With no offense to Brandon, we have Ralph next year or the year after. So something, in my feeling, something should be either removed or stated that it isn't what it reads.
Well, I would say that anytime that there is a transition in management, it makes sense to have a bit more formality in place. You know, like both parties should remain informed. You know, at the end of the day, we still do own the building. We should know what repairs are being done. Also, so that you all get recognized and credited for those repairs. And so, again, and then once that dialogue is there and in place, I just don't see that it will ever need to be, you know, heavily formalized.
and I think it can be an email. It isn't like you need forms with sign off and all this stuff.
It's written that way, though.
Well, it is written that way, but I think there's been a lot of trust between the parties and the people involved at the moment. We're not likely to run into any trouble. And if some of you are no longer there or Brandon's no longer here, like Brandon said, there's some advantage to having, you know, approval for a while till people realize this is working and we don't need to get permission for this kitchen sink repair, but we need to let them know if we're doing the gutters or a roof or, you know, significant things, but you're already doing that. You're already.
Well, that's the point. We're already doing that. So this is like a whole nother minutia that.
But this is what,
Greg has a comment.
this is what lawyers do, you know, they're risk averse and they're just trying to make sure that it's clear what's expected. And
Eight items, and I have some questions.
Greg,
I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. I haven't had a chance to read through the full leases yet, but I manage rental properties. Currently, I've got over a decade of experience in managing commercial real estate. I think this discussion is great. And I think personally in favor of, you know, a little more relaxed relationship, but for me personally, I would recommend that whatever we're going to agree to is in writing specifically the way we all agree to it now. And then that way everybody's on the same page moving forward, not this, oh, it says it this way in the lease, but we don't have to do it that way, kind of. That would be my suggestion.
And I don't think that that's what's happening right now. What I think is happening is that you can read it and assume that it means a much more formal process, you know, that there's an application process that needs to come to the board. It doesn't say any of that.
It does ask for approval, and so that could just be a verbal approval, say, yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't indicate who that approval person or group is.
well, it says the town and for these purposes, it would be Brandon.
So maybe we could clarify that can be done via email or however that, you know, in that more relaxed setting, it would, you know, I think be beneficial.
Would you want it to specify the means by which you communicate this stuff? I mean, I think that's, you're just kind of going further down the rabbit hole. Approval is approval, and I think.
And I guess, you know, written permission can be an email in my.
Right.
Information in today's world, so that would, you know, and for me, I'm the one speaking right now, you know, going to see Brandon is an easy gig. It's been,
Right.
you know, we got complimented earlier and I've complimented again because it's been when we had a question, it's been resolved fairly quickly and he's accessible, so that's all good. But, you know, just as Greg said, that's what it is today and what is it tomorrow, and having something, some variation in there about, you know, mentioning email or, you know, can be a verbal approval or whatever. something.
Okay.
Because it says specifically that nothing can be verbal in the document several places.
It says that lease can't be amended verbally.
And you could interpret that to mean that not having, someone else deal with it, would be, inappropriate. So to me, it's a little too loose. I think Greg backed that up a little bit. If what we're agreeing to, it needs to be somewhere, stated.
So I just inserted after written permission in parentheses, including via email.
And do we want to say the town / town manager?
Sure.
Because we interpret that as having, you know, 5 people there and 20 people in the
Yes.
audience and waiting 2 weeks or a month or whatever.
Yeah, we can clarify in here that this sort of stuff,
That would help us, I think, from my view.
is the town manager or his designee, something like that. Okay,
I think the only other things that Scott already mentioned,
Okay, the only other thing that was very minor was we currently have snow removal and lawn maintenance, and the new one has trash removal, which is fine. But we'll probably end up taking care of our own trash anyway, so we won't have to call Brandon to call somebody to come get our trash if we've talked about it.
Well, if you ever get real overwhelmed with it, just know that it's in there and we can come help you out.
The other thing we talked about was the term, which is the biggest concern that we've had over the last several months. And in this lease proposal written by Kelly, Bill Kelly, it talks about a 5-year lease initially, renewing at the end of that lease, 5 more years with the approval of the board and the trustees, correct? And then 5 more years, and then 5 more years until we get to 20. At 20 years, it would have to go back before the public, for a public vote.
Correct.
If we continued with our original lease, it said automatic renewal for 5 years, so it would have been 5 years anyway. So I guess our reasoning was, this is okay, because at the end of the period, I think it will be hopefully an agreeable situation in which we'll just say, fine, we'll renew. We agree to renew for 5 more years, 5 more years, and 20 years, who knows?
and we were brand new. Because the society hadn't had anything realistically in their hands. It was scattered throughout the town. And I know it came up in our earlier meeting, and I don't think I vocalized that, but now we're in a very different place. Where much of that has come, much of it has been lost during this time frame because a lot of it got auctioned off, high bidder, see you later. Because the town didn't have any repository, or the historical society didn't have any repository for those things. And we're in a different place now, so looking long-term, we're feeling like we have an obligation, a long-term obligation. History is long-term, to be able to have a place for that. So that's why it became so important for us and such a big deal to looking long-term, because we think history is long-term.
so one question I had shared with the board, my question for Bill Kelly, about whether at the 5-year point, the voters would need to reauthorize your lease, or whether the select board could do that. And Brandon hasn't shared Bill Kelly's advice about that with anyone other than us, those of us who met this afternoon. So the rest of the board needs to hear what Bill said about that.
Yeah, the select board would have the authority to renew the lease at those 5-year renewal periods. When the voters vote on this lease at the upcoming town meeting, that is when they grant you the authority to do so.
The one other thing that you didn't mention, Scott, that we talked about this afternoon was the septic system, you know, that
We
maybe,
didn't talk.
okay, well,
That
what
was the-
maybe after you guys had left, both leases have a discussion under maintenance and repairs about heating and plumbing systems and who's responsible for those. And so we wanted to get some clarification around that.
In the lease, it says that the lessor is responsible at its own cost for activating the systems. And so we just need clarity on what that actually entails. Does that mean repairing or replacing a septic system, or does it just mean having that system sort of tied into the town water? And so I will follow up with Bill for clarity there.
So our thought at the conclusion of our meeting this afternoon was that we would discuss all these issues with the select board tonight, and then assuming we can reach agreement on the terms, then we'd have Bill Kelly get this in final form for everybody to look at and for us to vote on 2 weeks from tonight.
And I forgot the schoolhouse lease, right?
Right.
There was no, just having that drafted as a separate document
Right,
for that schoolhouse property. It was just overlooked. It was an oversight.
With the same conditions.
with the same terms.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was acceptable to everybody this afternoon. So that's where that is. And unless people have questions about the old library lease, we could move on to the lighthouse. No? Okay. You want to talk about the lighthouse, or do you just want Matt to talk
I'll let
about his
Matt
concerns?
talk about the lighthouse.
Okay,
Just want the board to know that when this whole process started, that I was asked by Jane to draw up a lease. And she had sent an email with specific areas that she wanted to be clarified. I have put 40 hours into the lease that I presented to you people. And the lease that I got back on Friday, I felt like I got thrown under the bus. So with that in mind, I wasn't a very happy camper when we started this meeting this afternoon. And at the end, I capitulated to some point. But these are the requests specifically for Marshall Point. After the premises, the addition should read, the premises are under the care of the St. George Historical Society and administered for the town by the St. George Society's Marshall Point Lighthouse and Museum Committee. I think we are owed the recognition that we are managing that property for the town. The other thing that needs to be added is the Marshall Point Lighthouse and Museum has been designated as a National Historic Site. The reason for that is that now brings in the Maine Historic Preservation Commission, which we have to abide by their decisions. For example, we wanted to replace 7 windows in the museum last year with energy efficient, windows and storms. And they came down and said, no, these are historical panes, you have to have them refurbished. So I just want the board to know that there is another set of rules and regulations that we have to adhere to. Even went to, they came down to look at the damage done to the walkway and everything, and have given the blessing to whoever undertakes repairing it. Because there really isn't anything historically significant there that has to be taken care of, but we do have their permission to go ahead and do that. Under the terms, I want a 10-year lease term, the same term that we had prior to this. I don't need any 5-year, this, that. We operated with a 10-year term, and I think in all fairness, that that's the term that the lighthouse should have.
Do you want the renewal in there, the same renewal process in after 10 years? So
Yeah.
the board could renew it rather than it going back to the, great.
And under use, I think we need to add that alcohol is not permitted on the property. I think that needs to be very clear to people. Under maintenance and repair, with the sentence that ends, lawn maintenance for the premises, I want to add, and any other additional services as needed and agreed upon by both parties. Because there are times when the town and the Lighthouse Committee should share additional concerns or services, whether we help you with a Fisherman's Memorial or whether there's other things. I think it should be specified that if there are additional services needed, that would be agreed upon by both parties. I think that's just a good working deal.
Matt, I have a quick question about the use section, going back to that. Is cannabis use allowed on the property?
No smoking.
So should that be in the lease as well? The reason I ask is because the lease grants you the like authority to set the regulations around the uses. And so you all can put any of those regulations together and you can put them on the website and you can have them posted up, you know, on a sign down there. I worry that if we name one extenuating circumstance of use in the lease, but then don't name others, that it makes it.
But under the term in the lease where it says that we manage the, you know, the weddings, the photo shoots and stuff like that. To my knowledge, and I've been on the board now for over 10 years, we have never allowed any alcohol use on that property. Now, you know, I see where you're coming from. If you use alcohol and we've got to do cannabis, there's no nude bathing, you know, you can run the list as long as you want, but I mean, I just thought that that was something that needed to be stated and I can go either way with it.
Well, I think Brandon's point is that it's quite broad the way it is, and you get to decide and change over time. You know, no alcohol, no this, no that, no smoking. And the town doesn't need to be involved in those rules that you're making. Because you're the one letting people have a wedding there or photo
Well,
shoot.
you know, I see your point, but my point is, the property, we're managing for it, and I don't want to get into an alcohol or cannabis or anything else. We have enough problems with people flying drones. But
Right, and
I'm open to any suggestions. This is what I think, and I'm presenting it to you for you to consider. So that's one of the things. And the last thing that I have is that I think that we need, and Jane and I kind of talked about this afternoon, that if there is a catastrophic event to the premises that is outside the normal maintenance and repair responsibilities of the lessee, it shall be the responsibility of the lessor. Case in point, the two back-to-back storms. You know, I said to Brandon, I said to you, the board, that when it comes time to get the walkway fixed, if there's not enough money, we don't get reimbursed by FEMA, and that I would be willing to make up the difference, because I think that's the right thing to do. But I don't think the right thing is for us to have to try Marshall Point Road or replace 4 foot of shoreline or huge boulders and rocks that were up on the property. I think that's way and beyond what we're doing already for normal maintenance and taking care of the property. And I will just add to you that the list that I talked to you about since 2011, since the gutter project, which is ongoing, we have now put back $314,000 back into that property.
Well, we're all very grateful
So-
to the work of the association for the
These
lighthouse.
are my concerns, other than the fact that I think it would have taken Jane and Wendy a week to explain to the rest of the board what all legal verbiage in there is for everybody to understand, because it's quite inundating to try to figure out everything, and, you know, I like simplicity. The lease that I drew up was simple. It mirrored the lease that was there, and I understand that things have changed and everything, but anyways, that's what I would like to see you guys consider. I have this list here that I can give to you. I think it's very important that they get incorporated into the Marshall Point lease.
So I guess the we could take these one at a time, to see what members of the select board feel like with respect to a 10-year lease for the lighthouse.
Oh, I think Chris has some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chris.
I've tried to identify my concerns by the page and the item number.
Okay,
Maintenance work. On page 2, item 6, we're talking about no outside storage or vehicle storage. Our tenant, as part of the lease process, has privilege to have her vehicle there 24 hours a day.
That's not storage if she's actively using the vehicle. This is just to stop, like vehicles that are not registered and on the road from being stored there.
I mean, during the storm, Cal put a lot of their equipment there in between the projects they did, so.
That's temporary while an active project is going on rather than, you know, long-term storage. So
And sometimes we leave trailers up there when we're doing projects too. And we do have, with the project we're doing now with the gutter and the trim, we have a lot of material stashed on the side of the barn. I'm just trying to make sure, something Dale was just saying is that, you know, there's such a formal thing with Greg at it. I just want somebody to come and say, hey, well, according to your lease, you shouldn't be doing that. Trying to, so, okay, answer that for me. The other parts of the insurance, I'm very confused about the insurance. The campus. Is there a town umbrella that covers the campus in case somebody gets hurt and wants to go to court or something? We have liability inside the museum in case somebody falls or trips.
do you want to talk about the coverage of the property, Wendy?
Well, I mean, the property itself,
More like page 2, item 8, the indemnification.
in terms of the buildings, are listed on our regular insurance policy. Any claims that are brought, and I'm sorry, Nat, I'm gonna talk about legalese, but if they fall under the terms of the Maine State Torts Claim Act, and you can bring them, that is under our insurance policy. Do they specifically mention the grounds? No. And I don't know, I haven't talked to any insurance agents about that, so I don't know. It just lists the buildings from that property.
How about the parking lot out here? How's that covered?
I don't know, it's just, I don't know, cause it's
In my
just
mind-
lists the buildings.
In my mind, I think
And
it's the same thing.
The question is whether there's terms that are defined, like how is premises defined? Is it defined as the buildings and the grounds?
Yes,
But I don't-
in the lease it
Yeah,
is, but
right, but
in
I
the
don't know if our
policies.
insurance policies define it like that.
well, and they should, obviously they should include
Right.
if somebody slips on a sidewalk, whether it's here or at the lighthouse or
I mean,
the
we
old
have,
library.
I mean, it's not an ADA compliant, campus.
But it's not possible, so it's sort of grandfathered in.
We have many signs warning people about going down on the rocks. We have established a
Right, but
slight path.
that never means
Right.
anything in terms of a case.
And where the pavement is a little cockeyed, we have other signs warning people about uneven pavement too, so. We think we've done our diligence to warn the public that, things are there, so.
Well, I think it's a legitimate concern, and I do think we need to make sure that the town's insurance covers all of the grounds and premises, owned by the town you know, in the event that somebody's injured there. And that is on our to-do list, is reviewing all of the insurance coverage.
Case in point is a fisherman's. You know, if someone goes out there and it's not the easiest place to walk around. And has a header or something, I mean, in this lease, Fisherman's Memorial is on your ticket's not on ours. So,
Well, it's our responsibility to maintain the memorial, right?
Right.
And that's not quite the same thing about, you know, if somebody trips 2 feet from the memorial, you know, it's the same issue about what's the liability
Right.
coverage.
I have a question in terms of indemnification. How would that really work practically? If they are indemnifying the town under section 8?
I think the only thing they could actually get stuck with would be legal fees for the town,
Okay.
don't you?
I don't know, because
Well, if the town's liability is limited by the Maine Tort Claims Act,
it is.
we're never gonna be stuck with more than that. In fact,
Right.
their big concern is they might get stuck with more than that because nobody can come after the town for
Right,
more.
right.
And we talked about that today, and I said to Nat that I think that that is something for them to talk to their lawyer about, whether their directors and officers policy and their policies
Okay.
can protect them as much as possible, because it's a fact that the town's liability is limited. And I'm hoping yours can be limited, you know, through insurance and other means. But like Wendy pointed out, it doesn't mean that some Yahoo isn't gonna bring a lawsuit that costs you attorney's fees and stuff like that, that we've dealt with those situations in our past lives. But what they might recover ultimately is what you're hoping to limit. But that is a challenge. So did you have other questions, Chris?
Yes, bit of a boilerplate complaint, Page 4, item 16, to qualify leasing. There's all kinds of things in there, it's talking about bankruptcy and things like that, and I'm not sure how that applies to all.
Right. These are standard things in professional leases, and you don't need to worry too much about these things.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is that it for your list?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I think the questions for the select board are how people feel about Nat's proposal that the lighthouse lease be 10 years with then a 10-year renewal possibility. Do people want to weigh in on that?
Well, I assume that Bill Kelly included 5 years as the time period for a particular reason in terms of Maine state statutes.
I don't think it's
It's nothing to
statutes.
do with state statute. It's his own sort of risk averse approach to long-term
Okay.
leases and contracts.
Okay.
So, you know, last summer, we asked the voters for authorization for the select board to enter into contracts more than a year, since that's the limit of our normal authority. And we got that approval for 3
3
years.
Okay.
And at the time, in general, he was saying, you know, because things change over time, 3 years was kind of what his advice was.
Because
Yeah.
that was a more blanketed authorization that you all were getting,
Mhm.
meaning these are very specific, and so that's why he was willing to go to 5 years with the renewal.
Okay.
But I also feel like, the lighthouse has had a 10-year lease. It's not likely at all that we'd be looking to lease that property to someone else. So personally, I'm fine with a 10-year lease to the lighthouse. I don't, but I'm
You mean
curious.
2 10-year.
2 10-year, you know, a 10-year and then the renewal.
Okay.
That would be, and I still have to say that I don't really understand Bill's advice that the select board could, without public approval, renew the leases if we had to get special
The public
authority.
is giving you approval when they approve this lease. If they didn't
So they're
want,
giving us the full 20-year period.
yes.
That
Okay.
makes sense.
Well, in that,
If you say so.
in that case.
Well, Bill Kelly said so.
Why don't we do the same consideration for the historic society?
I think that personally, I think that building is very differently perceived in the community. You know, it's a building on Main Street in town that does have potential other uses or value. I mean, we talked today about the fact that I personally don't like the select board being in the property management business. I would love it if they had a capital campaign and they bought that building and we never had to do this again. But, you know, I'm personally not comfortable with a longer lease on the old library, but I'm only one of the 5 of us, so. Steve?
Actually, 4.
Well, 4, right, for Tammy.
I'm kind of with you, man. I think that we should be consistent. If we offer the Lighthouse Association 10 years, we should offer the Historical Society 10 years, just to make it. I disagree with you somewhat. I think about the building being on Main Street and there's potential for other uses. I think this is an absolutely terrific use of the property, and I would be in favor of giving the building to the Historical Society. But I don't expect that to happen tonight.
But
You have one vote for that.
we need to remember that what we're deciding tonight is what are we submitting to the voters for their consideration. And so,
I
you
think
know,
people would wonder why 10 and 5 here, why not 10 for both?
I do agree with Jane's point. They are very different properties, both being put to great use right now, but the use of the lighthouse is much more constrained than the use of the old library on Main Street. I think that is the only difference. I don't think that there's the necessity to keep, you know, leases across different properties are often vary. You know, the lease for the secondhand shop at the transfer station doesn't follow the 20-year, 5-year renewal. They just sign up, you know, they took a 3-year and then they'll wait and renew it again if they're able to.
These 2 properties actually do come under the Historical Society.
right, but one is a national monument and a historic site and the other one is not.
Yeah.
You know, that is, in my mind, a big difference, and it's the public that should decide.
Right, like if you're considering just the properties themselves, not the mission of what is
Right.
taking place there, but the old library building on Main Street and the lighthouse and keeper's house at Marshall Point, they are very different. Even if they share a very common mission in what they do in terms of preserving town history, educating the public on it, et cetera.
Wendy, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I guess I'm with Jane and Brandon that the lighthouse can be 10 years. I'm okay with the 2 10-year terms. And I guess the Historical Society building could be 4 5-year terms. Based on what?
So we have some time to think. I mean, obviously, we need to tell Bill Kelly what we want him, how we want him to revise these. But, you know, if we voted right now, it sounds like we would have a tie. And if you have a tie, you're not gonna pass the 10-year thing. Which means I assume that those of you who favor 10 years would then vote in support of a 5-year lease. Well, then we'd have a consensus on 5.
Were you hoping to vote on these tonight?
Well, no, because we don't have final language and I want them to review the final language. I mean, we need to have a consensus on the terms we're sending to Bill Kelly. So if we're stuck at a tie of 2-2 in a straw vote on the lease term,
You know, when we talk about what authority we have, is there statutory financial authority or statutory contracting authority
Yes,
given
it's
to select boards?
1 year.
1 year, and
That's-
that's contained in the main
state
statute.
statutes.
Okay,
And and only if you have, permission from the voters to have multi-year contracts, which
okay.
is why we got the 3 years, so we could even have the snow plows.
So what is Bill's theory that why I mean, I know it's gonna go to the voters, but why is he proposing the
Less,
5
5
year?
years.
Why aren't we sticking?
I think because of the reason that circumstances change and the voters shouldn't. No,
Do you mean, why is he proposing longer?
Yeah.
Than the 1 or 3?
Yeah.
Because these are very specific in their uses, he can understand why you could enter a long-term lease with a historical society or the Lighthouse Association.
But then that contravenes statutory authority. I mean, if
Right.
we.
No, but the difference is that the statutory, authority, is not specific whatsoever. That is encompassing all contracts. So it
But
would
that's my
also.
question. In the state statutes,
Mhm.
what
Right.
does it say about our financial or contracting?
it's a 1
authority?
year,
1 year.
just
1
like
year.
the budget.
So aren't we, if we're going forward with this, we're contravening the statutory authority?
No,
But the
you
town
all
is-
are not approving this, the
Right.
voters are.
It would be the voters
Voters-
making a choice.
The voters could put
Okay.
together 1,000-year lease if they wanted to.
So shouldn't we put it to the voters? In terms of a possible 5-year or 10-year?
Ideally, no. Ideally, we could reach an agreement that worked for all parties and voters could vote to approve or, decline what was put forward.
We discussed that this morning about what likelihood and none of us wanted to, have it appear to the town folks that we were, yakking at each other and mad at each other and not cooperating with each other, all the things that, so it was kind of a compromise that to this point.
Well, and the Historical Society people that are sitting in the room right now have said they can live with 5 years.
Then that's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
there was consensus, I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they want it for as long as possible and
Many towns have, a 99-year lease with their historical society, so.
But again, if there's this much support to extend it, then it means that the renewal process should go very quickly, assuming that both parties keep executing a high level of their mission that they have been. And it means it doesn't need to go through the public process again. And, if that would occur, then this Historical Society's lease and the Lighthouse's lease is twice as long as it previously was, if they get the full 20 years.
all right, so we're in agreement then that we'll ask Bill to revise these. I think what I'll do is type up the things that you've said, that we've talked about, and share before we send it to Bill, the little changes, that we've all noticed, and take out the apartment, and
the ones I spoke to that I can distribute to you, so you can.
that'd be great if you give me those. And then, but I want you to, before we send it to Bill Kelly, I want you to look at, this is the list, so that we can hopefully contain our legal fees, for the town.
Do you
by-
wanna go through the rest of it? Because then
Oh, you have more? I didn't know, I thought you were
No,
done with
I've
your,
Giving you the 6, you're asking the board whether they wanna do the term.
I think the only other consequential issue in my mind was this issue about, in the event of a catastrophic natural disaster or something. And I thought what we had talked about earlier today was that, repairs would be made as agreed upon, but between the parties. Obviously, most of the maintenance in this contract has been put on the tenants but the town obviously is willing and, in the current situation, able to do repairs of the walkway, foundation but in the and there's no way that I think any of us really think it's reasonable to expect the tenant to, pay for $1 million damage to the lighthouse if it were sustained in a future storm. But it also might not be possible for the town to afford to fix, something really expensive. So I do think that it makes sense for the lease to, take that into consideration, that if there were catastrophic damage to the lighthouse, that the parties would have to do our best to figure out what could be, repaired and how we go about it.
And come up with some language that recognizes that if there is a catastrophic event, that, you know, we'll work together on. it.
Right,
But
that was,
I think it's necessary, given the past history in
Right.
January, that, you know, you want to be inclusive in the lease. then
Right.
That should be included in the lease.
yeah, and I did do that, so I will, that'll be on the list that we'll share, so that, because that obviously
Okay.
is possible.
And as I understand it, that you will send your recommendations to Kelly, and then the leases will be back to you people, and we'll get to see them before you make your decision as to what's gonna go.
So my suggestion is that you and I and Scott make a list of the changes we want Bill Kelly to make, that we agree on, and then we send one list to Bill Kelly, he makes it, and then he sends it back and we all look at it, and we hopefully vote on it 2 weeks from tonight, and that's what goes to the voters in May. And another thing that we didn't share with the select board that we talked about this afternoon is, according to Brandon, and I don't know anything about this, we have the option of like putting this on a paper ballot or having it done at the town meeting, like with the other budgetary considerations. And the preference of the Historical Society is to do it at the town meeting, which is, something that this group should,
Well, you need to be aware, if we were to petition, on the petition, we can ask either for a secret ballot or town meeting. So if we were to present a petition and it was legally by the 160 people and, you know, and if we put town meeting, that's where it's gotta go.
But that's the problem with the time frame was pinched in, where we could make that happen. So that was part of another thing that we did.
are sort of a compromise, conversation that,
We were talking about, because that was one of our big concerns. And, if we could get this done in a timely manner and feeling like we didn't think we could, we were saying, well, give us an additional 1-year lease, and then we'll be able to work through all the. Well, no one really wanted to do that. So that's why we've ended up back here. And very close, it seems, so.
do people have any, concerns or questions about town meeting versus the ballot?
Like, I would rather have it on the ballot. I think it's more informative when we're sitting in town meeting and people are reading off numbers, and I just think for somebody really to consider it properly, I would rather see it on a ballot.
And what would the verbiage be about, do you think?
It would say a lease for X number of years in these increments. And the select board will, you know, approve it, have the terms like that. I wouldn't include all the liability stuff. I'd have the terms.
I mean, it
I'd
would
have
be,
the
it would be
terms.
posted on the website.
It would be. People could read it if they want, but I would have the terms. That's,
I have a side comment based upon some of the other discussions you had tonight. And I think you're poignant saying that, you know, it's tough to have the town manage these other properties. But you all talked about accepting a donation of another property with a building on it tonight.
We talked about that at the last meeting, and the select board, after hearing the presentation from the Parks and Rec director and Brandon about how that would be used, we agreed to put that to the voters. We're not gonna the five of us can't decide to accept that property and spend money on it in the future. So again, it will be the responsibility of Brandon's team to sell that to the community, you know, so that when it's voted on, you know, hopefully they'll be persuaded this is a good use, you know, for the Parks and Rec Department to have a building for these purposes.
Is that going to the ballot?
Yes, it is.
No.
Yeah, we just decided that 2 weeks ago, so that will, you're right, though, the same conversations
is your-
happened.
Is your question, is it going to the ballot versus town meeting, or is it going to voters?
Yes. No.
It's going to voters.
Right, it's going to the voters.
I was asking, is it going to the ballot or is it going to the town meeting?
I don't know the answer yet. I have to, this is my first town meeting process. I need to do my homework to make sure that I am very clear on how that is decided and differentiated.
And so, and that's a concern to us. You know, I heard Wendy, and I haven't participated in the town meeting but once for a very short time. But so, yeah, you know.
Right,
And making arbitrary decisions, I would be interested when this occurs, which is problematic because we would have to know already, in order to try and, direct it the way we wanted to via petition. And so it seems to me like it's arbitrary, how that distinction gets made, because I don't know any better.
well, I'm with Brandon, this is my first year as select board chair, so I don't really know how the decision's been made in the past. I don't know, Van and Tammy, if,
My understanding is ordinances go before there's a ballot item.
ordinances, but these aren't,
Well, what about?
these aren't ordinances, these are what, a referendum, is that, I don't know what this is called. These property issues, so I'm afraid we don't have the answer about that, but they will be treated the same. I think the acceptance of the donation of the Snows Point and these leases, which are 3 property issues before the voters. And, you know, and I do think part of it is just like with the Parks and Rec Department, if you're worried that people don't appreciate the dollars and cents, the benefit to the community, you know, that's something that you'll have an opportunity to convey to the community to get them to vote in favor of this. Yeah, Scott.
I know that you have one of the least property to shop at the transfer station. Is that treated the same way? It's on the ballot.
Because they agreed to a 3-year lease, it didn't have to. So like if,
3-year lease was just for this year. That's what you told us. You said you got permission from the voters.
well, and that was what I thought. I thought that because we normally only have 1-year authority, that in the town, that was voted on at a special town meeting, that at every town meeting, we'd have to have a question that authorized the select board to enter into multi-year contracts up to 3 years. But Brandon asked Bill Kelly that, and he said, no, that was an ordinance. Oh, you didn't?
I asked Bill about the renewal process here.
No, but I thought that you asked him whether that 3-year authority we got in the town meeting August 5th was like permanent 3-year authority, or does that go, just like other things in the town meeting, there are some things like the carryover provision, there's some warrants that appear every year. And I had assumed that the 3-year authority would be one of those, so that,
Oh, I think that is right. I'll have to double check on that.
so these, you know, this is where the fact that, you know, we all want to comply with the law and make sure that we are doing things, you know, responsibly on behalf of the community. And so whichever that is, you know, if it's a permanent 3-year authority, then we could always enter into 3-year leases. But if it goes in there and every year they give us permission to do 3-year snowplow contract or whatever, then, yeah, I know that's loud, isn't it?
There is an additional property as well, but they also agreed to a 3-year lease instead of going to the public. the,
Oh,
Firemen's
Route
Association. Yeah, the property where the burn building is. On Route 73.
all right.
They're not storing a lot of stuff there. They burn it up after you.
Right.
Did you, I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh,
did
I
you
was
have
just, a point of clarification. I believe that as a select board, we can accept a gift of land, but we think it's a better idea to let the whole town decide.
I think the difference between that land on the marsh and the Snows Point Road building is that it's gonna cost the voters money if we accept the Snows Point Road property, whereas to accept a vacant landlocked parcel for just open space does, the entire cost to the town is like $300 in property taxes that they're not gonna receive because we accepted it. I think that's,
Doesn't
that
that still have to be voted on? When we accept any property, doesn't that have to go to vote? That's what I was told, that even that little parcel at the marsh, that it has to go to the voters.
So the advice that I got here, is there anything, do we need to do anything else with the leases, or are we good to let the agenda wander?
but we should verify that for going forward.
So,
So that, like
So-
that landlocked parcel that we accepted.
right, and it was authorized when, voters authorized a money towards land acquisition, so meaning like Old Woods Farm could be purchased without it going.
Oh, right, that's
a
the
vote.
permission that the voters give us permission to acquire for the purposes that are in our land acquisition policy. But that's just a select board policy. Oh, you're saying that because,
It's in the budget.
and because we wouldn't be spending money on it,
Mhm.
we didn't have to get it approved. But Tammy's right, we should just, for the future, get that nailed down. I believe that was the distinction. But, we do have other stuff on the agenda, we better. So I will you wanna hand me that and I'll, type that up with the changes that we talked about earlier, and then I'll share it with you and Scott. Okay, thank you. All right, so other items,
Is the lawyer working on the, lease for the schoolhouse too?
yes, and that wasn't, fell through the cracks, but what we agreed with Scott and Dale today was they're okay with a 5-year lease with similar terms to the old library for the old schoolhouse.
So we're agreeing that it's gonna be 5 years, not 10?
Yes, that's what they told us. Scott said, Tammy just wants you to confirm that you said you could live with 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I did it with Dale, with Sarah and Jenny, who's in Paris.
Oh my goodness, poor Jenny. She,
I haven't, and I sent out an email this afternoon outlining what we've done. Tammy probably hasn't had a chance.
I haven't had a
to look at it yet,
chance.
But I know.
But it would have the same 20-year total.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the way that Brandon interpreted, he said with the non-public voting on the renewal.
Right.
It would be the-
Pathetic, it is kind of a 20-year lease.
well, as long as you can persuade the three select board members, then yes. You
You
know,
guys might change more often than we do.
well, guaranteed.
Thank you very much.
We might not be here in 20 years either.
So I should point out to the select board that, you'd been told that there was a third ordinance that we were gonna be considering. You know, the staff, would prefer if one select board could come in and sign off on the warrants, but, Bill Kelly did not recommend that, and so Brandon has dropped that, request, so that's why you're not hearing that. So Steve, do you wanna, and Rob Kelly's on, do you wanna give us an update on the CDC's housing?
Well, Rob Kelly actually offered to do it. Is he still there?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, absolutely. still in early days. As you might have experienced, even in some of the other projects happening in the community right now, engineering resources are incredibly constrained. So it's taken us a longer time than we had hoped to finish the surveying and engineering on the property. That has come back and it's finalized. I'm waiting for final drawings back. And part of what comes out of that is our assessment of the maximum number of units that can be built while still adhering to Maine law. And there's a couple of different intersection points for that. One is the density rules under LD 2003. Obviously, that would be maximum density. That will be constrained by the DEP rules on, actually DEP and Corps of Engineer rules, because we're next to Jones Brook, on setbacks and percolation of the soil. So essentially how much septic we can get. I'm still waiting for that final assessment from Gartley and Dorsey. So total number of units proposed is still TBD. As soon as I get that, we are intending to engage an outside consulting firm. Those of you who've been following housing developments in Maine, recent articles in the BDN and the Portland Press Herald have talked about a number of different developers and conceptual designers in Maine who've been very successful in recent housing projects, particularly successful in modular construction and in collaborating and coordinating with Maine Housing Authority. One of those is Dooryard. We've been in conversations with Dooryard for about a year on this project. And I've walked the property with their CEO, Kara Wilbur. We've talked about our goals, which is to make this very much the feel of a neighborhood, you know, what's usually referred to as a village design. It is still our hope that this will be essentially a mixed economic development, including rental units, home ownership units that are workforce affordable. That, for those of you who don't necessarily have this top of mind, Maine housing defines as between 80 and 120% of the area median income for a family. That really represents kind of the workers in the community. That represents, you know, the folks who work in our school. That represents the folks who are small business owners. And it is our intention, although these have not been finalized, that we will prioritize those workers in St. George. We have verified with our attorneys that is a legal process. Various other housing development in communities in Maine have done so. Bath for one, Buxton for another, there are others. So that we're really targeting the folks who are in the community looking for solid permanent homes for their families. Or for rental properties to be able to enter the community as a working professional in that community. There's still a lot of work to do there. That's really when we begin engaging the public. Our process will begin with a design workshop. We'll include a small subset of the community to look at things like, you know, conceptual designs of buildings so that they look like they fit inside the community. You know, that they look like small capes or salt boxes that are consistent with what you might see on Long Cove Road or on Watts Ave. But we'll be modern construction. We'll be most likely modular built. That's the most efficient and effective way to do it these days. It's both speed to getting a house up and overall cost factor. The 18-unit apartment complex, for example, that Dooryard did in Madison was 7 months from groundbreaking to habitation, which is unheard of in a stick-built housing project. We intend to, after doing some of this preliminary work so that we have something to show people, we intend to do a series of public meetings just to familiarize the community with what we're intending. Through that process, also then begin thinking about where we start. It is the nature of building affordable housing that you're looking for help from, for example, Maine Housing Authority, from the Genesis Fund, among other funders. That changes year to year. It depends what the Maine legislature approves. Dial back the clock 1 year and rural rental housing was being well funded. And so that might be something that, you know, a builder goes after first. That program expired. So it's going to depend somewhat, where we start is going to depend somewhat on what funding is currently or in the near term available. We're in a good position where we're funded through pre-development. So if I kind of walk you through the timeline, there's pre-development, which is all the surveying. There's land acquisition, which we have done. There's pre-development, which is the surveying, conceptual design, and essentially you know, phase design, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. That, you know, we'll build 5 houses in the first phase, we'll build 5 houses in the second phase, or we'll build an apartment, a small apartment complex in this phase. Once we have a sense of what funding looks like, and once we have a sense of essentially what fits inside the envelope of setbacks and septic, et cetera, inside the site, then we could take a phase design to the planning board. And with planning board approval, then we would essentially be shovel ready. We'd be ready to go. So we should begin conceptual design probably within the next several months. Kara Wilbur and I are trying to get a meeting on the calendar actually for next week. I'm waiting for the final survey documents from Gartley and Dorsey. And we'll be doing broad community outreach once we've done that early conceptual design work, so people have something to look at. Otherwise, it's, you know, just a plot of land and maybe, you know, a number of homes, but that doesn't tell people what they want to know, which is, does this fit in the community? What's the impact going to be on traffic? You know, is it going to look and feel like what happens in the rest of St. George? And we'll be in a position to talk about that. And then actual permitting and construction is really going to depend on timing around funding. And, you know, obviously what's happening in the federal government level is kind of upsetting what's happening at the state government level. So some of that may just have to work its way out a little bit. But we'll be ready to start talking more broadly in the community about specifics. I would say mid to late summer.
Well, thank you.
To answer any questions.
Do people have questions? Thank you for that update. I know everybody's eager for this to succeed, and it's a tall order. So.
And all I'll say is please, like, grant us a little bit of grace, because there's a lot of behind the scenes, you know, grinding engineering work that has to happen before you can show somebody even an idea that has a chance of being built. And we want to give people something concrete. We want to give people something that they can look at and say, yeah, I'd like to see my kid and their family in that house. I'd like to see the new teacher who starts, you know, in August in one of those houses. And that's really what we're targeting.
Well, great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much.
So I circulated to you all remarks for submission in the town report, which is Tara wants everybody's submissions by the end of the week. So if you have, let me know if you had any thoughts, additions, clarifications, concerns about the draft that I sent.
Thought it was very well done. I liked it the way it was. Didn't have any additions that I'd suggest. Susie, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your
Thank
work.
you, Susie. Thanks, Van.
I agree with Ann.
Okay,
It was well written.
thank you.
Explains what needs to be explained.
Well, I just didn't want to submit something on behalf of all of us without, without you agreeing to it. So that's why I circulated it.
Thanks for doing that.
Sure. So Brandon, your report. Goodness, we're all wrung out and we're not done.
I think the most pressing pieces is I just wanted to make sure that the select board had the 2 dates for public hearings on their radar. And so our public hearing around new ordinances, that will be 2 weeks from today, March 10th, 5 PM. So that will be before your select board meeting. And so I sent that to the paper to post at the end of last week, just hoping that they would get approved tonight. And so that should be posted this week. And we will post on our website as well. And then the public hearing for leases and accepting the youth and scouting property, that's scheduled for April 7th. Also at 5 PM, right before a select board meeting. So again, hopefully at the meeting on the 10th, we have leases that can be put forward, and then I will post about the public hearing on the 7th. Let's see, other things going on. Other things going on are the RFP for the Resilience Committee went out, that was posted, and so just fielding some responses on that.
That's the engineering grant.
Correct. And lastly, we were going to invite Steve Sullivan to come to a future select board meeting to talk more about personal property tax. You know, when this group had talked about it last, we'd said, you know, we sort of need to do a little bit more of our homework, make sure that we understand it all, and can feel confident about it. And so
I talked to him and he said he'd be glad to come. And he also clarified that fishermen are exempt and hopefully they can ask him questions about that. And also then Jackie could be here because, you know, there are some questions we'd have to decide about implementation and so forth. But I was really happy that he was willing to come and do a presentation, and we can broadcast that widely so that people who have questions about the personal property tax can come and hear straight from the state person in charge of this.
But fishermen are exempt.
Fishermen are exempt. Now, what they do have to do, anybody who has a business, operates a business in town, gets a form from Jackie that you fill out what your business equipment is, and then at the bottom, there's exemptions, including fishermen. You check that box, and then even though you listed above, you had 800 traps and 2 coolers and whatever, you don't have to pay anything. And he said that the state allocates an amount of money that we're foregoing because of the exemption. So let's just say if the fisherman wasn't exempt, he'd have been paying $100 of tax. The state gives us $50 back for the fact that the state has this exemption. So he can explain all that, but that is among the reasons that it makes sense for people to fill out the paperwork, for the state to get accurate information, because we will benefit from having that be the case.
Okay, good.
So I'll just work with Brandon on picking a date for a meeting where we don't have a ton of other stuff on, and we'll have him come and the public can come and ask him questions.
in the meantime, well, I guess we can discuss this after about whether or not our contract with KRT should be amended to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you now that given all of the,
We should probably
Yeah, we
wait till
should
it's on the
wait.
agenda.
yeah, when it's on, I have some thoughts, but there's no point in getting into it now.
That's all I had that's pressing, knowing that we only have 4 minutes left.
How about okay, so I told you the sheriff's coming, that's my emergency services thing. He'll be here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Nothing else from the comprehensive plan committee and the budget committee. Anybody else's committees have things you,
The Parks and Rec, just want to make sure people know that the Muscle Ridge Hoops Tournament, and you may have seen the sign on Main Street. The 28th of Friday, starting Friday evening and running through Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, if you want to pop in and get something from the concession stands, the proceeds go to support the Boosters. The Boosters is a private group that raises money, and a lot of their efforts are what keeps the recreation department's budget so low each year, is they pay for things like a new scoreboard and so on. So a group worth supporting, yeah, if you feel like having a hot dog on Saturday or something.
Good.
Why not?
So what
Yeah,
about the
burger.
planning board one?
The planning board, just briefly, there was an application by the Smith family to rebuild floats and, the entire, pier system that was totally destroyed in 2023. The application was approved contingent upon DEP and Army Corps, permit approval, because that pier system apparently extends into the harbor. So that's what it is.
I would add to the planning board, Terry and I met with the man who has the junkyard on Ripley Creek. He wanted to just come in and ask some clarifying questions before filling out the application. He doesn't think that he would get permitted there. He's looking into a different spot that he will pursue having it, and so he's gonna fill the application out via, once he has secured some of that, and then that would go before the planning board. So no real update yet, other than the fact that it is still in the works and it's moving forward.
And he recognizes that he's not in a good position where he is now.
Yeah, he doesn't have enough physical space to screen it properly, do all the things that would be required.
Any other committee stuff we should be aware of?
Well, I can do it in about half a minute.
Okay.
Ken is on Zoom here, but they talked about the priorities of trail work that they'd like to work on in the future, and especially the Old Woods Farm property and improving those trails are already great. I've been on a couple of them. And then a possibility of some adjacent land that might even provide parking off 131, but this is in discussion stages. So that's just something that they're working on, and we're not to mention any names yet. Okay, and then they want to update the placard at Fort Point because it's been inaccurate for years, and you have to get state approval for it. It's the bureaucracy, but they're going to eventually get an accurate historical placard where the old Fort St. George was. And they're also discussing a possible education event on the emerald ash borer for the ash trees, of which there are a lot on the Fort Point Trail and around town. So that's pretty much it. Is that good enough, Ken? Maybe he's not there. Anyway, that's my update.
Tammy, anything you wanted to?
The cemetery committee is meeting on March 6th at 4:30 here at the town office.
Is there a speaker at that meeting?
I haven't heard anything if they were able to reschedule that. I think Jolene might have been working on it.
Okay, yeah. We can let people know if there's a speaker.
Was it
coming.
related to sea level rise, I think?
I know that they were gonna invite the lady who knows about green burials at some point, but that might not be that meeting. But we'll post that on the website when it happens.
The shellfish committee met on February 18th, and they participated in the fisherman's forum last week at the Samoset. Jeff, who was here tonight, the warden, he's dealing with 4 ordinance violations, three of which are digging without licenses. They have dates for the shoreline cleanup, but they will be posted after being updated again because there's some conflicts dates, clean up Turkey Cove, Mosquito Harbor, Nabby Cove, which I believe is in Cushing, Salt Pond, Broad Cove. And they're looking for team leaders once they get that all clean, to help with those shoreline cleanup days. The 2025 budget was reviewed and reviewed and approved by the Shellfish Committee with no major changes or expenses. The 2025 allocation plan and license conservation information was reviewed and approved. And the report for 2024 from our committee was put together and sent to the DMR, so they know what was going on with the committee, all the different clamming and shellfish committees for the year. And I submitted a letter to Tara to go into the town report, which is related to water quality. They asked that I bring, each town was asked to submit that to go into the town report. And you'll like the little picture of the dog. They have an appeal from the GRRSM Clam Management Committee related to dog waste. So hopefully that will go into the town report for everybody to read. And I got a report back from David Taylor, who did work with the DNA testing down here at the marsh and Ripley Creek, and they didn't find any thing related to human waste, but they did find related to dogs and fish waste, obviously. But it wasn't any amounts that he felt was an issue. They were detected, but it wasn't high enough numbers that they felt it was a concern, but they didn't find anything. Oh, and
We're going to test again in a few weeks, just sometimes it takes multiple tests.
Well, that's what he said, where it had been so cold and everything was frozen that you really can't get a true test of what might possibly be there, but based on this current analysis, there was no human resources detected. Dog and bird were detected on both sides, he said. It was not permitted.
Did you ever smell it?
I did one time, yeah,
Uh-huh.
driving through.
Did it smell like sewage or?
I don't know if my nose is that acute to be able to identify it.
I've never smelled it, but maybe I haven't been close enough.
They're thinking it's organic waste that's rotting, but it smells, yeah,
Did you
really
smell it?
bad. Yeah, really.
But does it smell like sewage or it smells like a rotting dead animal?
No, it smells like sewer.
Hmm.
I came through town the other morning about 8 o'clock and got in front of the Grace Institute, and it was just horrible.
But it's, I mean, you know, when
And it was
low tide has a scent to it, that's,
But it's usually
Not-
not that strong.
well,
Can
it's
be,
strong
maybe
at
too
my
hot.
house,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, you call it a clam flat smell.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not like a sewer smell.
okay,
That's different.
I move we adjourn.
okay, all right.
Oh, you want to talk about sewer?
Favorite
I was gonna
topic.
talk about.
Do I hear a second?
Is there a second?
Yes.
Second.
All in favor? Adjourned at 8:07
Oh my
or whatever it is.
Yeah, I did all that a little bit, yeah.
does not smell like the way you